I am Joel Forde, and welcome to Forde Co. It's a spin-off program of Extra, the political program that the CBC mounts every election season. Now, in honor of International Women's Day on March 8th, we thought we'd take a look at women and politics. As recently as January 2022, Barbados had female leadership at the head of both main political parties. Now, have we arrived, or in the words of Jimmy Cliff, do we still have a hard road to travel and a rough way to go? We'll find out in just a moment when we come back with our guests. Stay with us. I saw an article in the Washington Post, and it was dated March the 4th, where a New York State candidate, she was asked twice in the same candidate interview how she planned to juggle being a mom and run for a Senate seat. As one person said, she must be able to be a parent to her child as that child is 4. Now, these questions are rarely asked of male candidates. So do our societal norms still see women as mothers first and foremost, and judge us by that ability? I'm going to start with Nalita Kajada. Nalita, your thoughts?
Oh wow. I would say yes. We are still seen. Women are still seen as the principal caregivers for children, for the elderly, and a lot of times, participating in active politics, you make a decision based on your family life, and not only your family life, but sometimes the expectations of you that you should put family first, or you should put children first, or you shouldn't have your own goals and objectives and so on. So yes, it is still very very common, and believe you me, it is still a lot of times the gatekeepers are the women as well,
Well,
because
that's exactly what happened in this article, because she was saying the
yeah,
people that asked her these questions were women. And she was
yeah, yeah.
shocked not only that these were women asking her these questions, but that the other people in the meeting did not stop it or speak up against it.
Yeah, women are the gatekeepers for most of the things in the norms that we have in society, because it is how the control is done. You know, the men control the women who have power then control the other women who have less power, the women who have less power control the women who have lesser power. And and we keep people in check depending on their status and their economic power and so on. But yeah, it's still very much so. We don't ask men that. Although I have been watching the elections, and I have been watching how men dress, and I have been writing my own notes about my concerns about how men dress. I did not publish them, but they a lot of the time the men just didn't look good on platform. But you didn't hear anybody saying, "But wait, he just left home and come on that stage like that," you know. You didn't hear a man saying that, or the pants is too tight, or it's too low, or something like that. You weren't hearing that. But there's always this question about how women look, how women behave, the family. And I mean, the family is critical. I mean, I love my family dearly. And if you decide to have a family is important. But we don't ask men that. And I think it was a Jamaican politician who said that what women politicians need is a good wife.
Yes, I
In
remember
terms
reading
of
that article many, many
right,
moons ago when
in
I was at
terms of looking after,
university.
yeah,
She said that they need a wife because the kind
they
of
need a good
support
wife.
system that men have when they're allowed to get into elective politics, women don't have. I'm going to come to you, Senator Shanika Roberts Odell, because you're a political activist and a scientist. Do voters care? Do voters really care whether you're juggling mommyhood and political life and professional life? Do you care how
I
great a
think to
mother
some
your political representative is?
I think that's a multi-layered question. The reality of the situation is that I think when voters boil it right down to what is important to themselves, when they think analytically, no. When they first see you, when they start to that initial pause, they look to see in you what they can identify with. And I think to some extent, Nolita is very correct. And a lot of times, it is women. We look to see what is the hair done suitably, is the dress appropriate. One of the things that I found critical, especially coming into politics, is I've been asked similar to that Senate potential Senate runner. Well, when do you plan to have children? And it was asked so effortlessly to me, and it was by someone I'm sure who cared about me, yes, who saw potential in me, yes. But I was so stunned by the question that I looked at them and blinked because I baffled. It goes critical to what women in politics have to go through. You have to think about you because others will think about them for you. The issue is that, and I completely agree that you need sometimes a good political wife. It handles a lot. Women in relationships handle a lot. And I was once told, have you made your decision yet? And I thought, decision about what? He said, about which you're going to give. Are you going to be married? Are you going to have children? Are you going to give up policy? I probably stand and said, I plan to give up. None. None. I plan to give up. And they pointed out to me that, particularly in Barbadian politics, you don't see a female the trifecta, been keep doing the trifecta because the perception is that she will never be able to give all her attention to a husband, appropriate attention to a husband, appropriate attention to the children, and then attention to the consummate. And I think a lot of times, yes, the man that something will have to suffer at some point, but a lot of it is perception, and it's something that we're socialized to think about as a society. As I said, look to see what they see in you. And, they look to see, okay, is she a good-looking woman? Is she a good mother? Is she those things very surface levels, but they do think about them, and sometimes voters do impression on what they see as vacuum. Sometimes, but I think a lot of times, those female politicians among us who have stuck it out and have really continued on the path have been able to push past that and show, they're brilliant and the way they feel about them and what they're willing to do about them. But it's still definitely a perception and an issue for women in politics.
I'm going to apologize to my audience because first and foremost, when we came back from break, I forgot to introduce all of my guests. It's Nolita Gajada. She's a retired program officer at the Bureau of Gender Affairs. Roshana Trim, she's a youth development specialist and also the project lead for Lead Hership Institute, and Senator Shanika Roberts Odell, who's a political activist and scientist. And another apology, we've been having internet issues all day. If there's one thing COVID has taught us, it is that all of us are suffering from bad internet. Roshana, I'm going to come to you. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, I think her name is Lisa Hanna, and I'm so sorry if I've got the name wrong because it's just come to me. She is a politician in Jamaica. She was on the beach in a swimsuit and a cover over and the clutching of pearls because here was this parliamentarian on the beach in a swimsuit with her legs exposed. Oh dear, there is the end of society as we know it. So why are women expected to hold this strong moral line, women in politics, and men just get to be men?
We hold, and that's a really good question, but we hold women to different standards than we hold men to. And that starts from as early as how we socialize girls and how we socialize boys. Boys will be boys, girls should be seen and not heard. You know, we kind of allow for boys to explore, but we expect that we will raise daughters who are class and who are meek mannered but still able to hold their own and those different things. And so when we see women in politics be sexy or sensuous or any other thing that goes away from that very chaste, very straight buttoned role, the same one that we had for teachers where they could not have children out of wedlock, they could not do certain things. That idea that in order to be a good mother, you have to have very specific traits and tendencies. We hold that same thing to women. And so, for example, we have Auntie Cynthia and we have Auntie Mia, as she is called affectionately around the region. And so we treat them in that very maternal role. And anything that deviates from what we traditionally see as being maternal, we we clutch our pearls, and all of a sudden that person is no longer worthy to represent.
But you remember when the prime minister first stepped into the role, she went, I think it was to a tent, and she went upon the stage and she danced behind Lil Rick, and there was more pearl clutching. I mean, this is a woman that, for as long as I've known her in the entertainment sector. She's managed bands. She was Minister of Culture, still is. So what is it? I'm still trying to understand exactly what is it that we expect from our women, especially when we see them in a political role. Nalisa, I'll come back to you.
I I don't. I think a lot has to do with how not just how boys and men have been socialized, but how the society has been created. How the society has been. How we have created a society that says men should do this and women should do that. I have been working with Eugene Bartow's definition of the gender system, where she talks about the ideological and the ideological, and I'm not sure his brain has gone what the other one is. But the ideological talks a lot to how we perceive women, how we perceive a society. And until we are able to move away from a society that perceives women to have a specific role, or men to have a specific role, we're going to have this kind of problems in terms of letting people rise to their full capabilities and their capacity. And that's something that gender has taught me, if nothing else, that it is a job that will take another 30, 40 years to change that ideology. Because even although we have legislation that tells us that it should be gender neutral, that women should and men have same opportunities and access to power and so on, we're far, 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 far away from that. And we only needed to see that during the election, even the call of the election that you're talking about, Prime Minister Modi right now, the call of the election. How dare her call the election a year and a half before the elections were due?
Nalita, I'm going to ask you
Mind
to put
you,
a pin in it there. We're going to go to a commercial break, but when we come back, we will definitely continue in this vein. You're watching Forde Co. We'll be back in just
okay.
a moment. And welcome back to Forde Co. If you've just joined us, this program is a spin-off of Extra, the program that we do during elections. My guest today, Nalita Gajada, she's a retired program officer at the Bureau of Gender Affairs. Roshana Trim, the youth development specialist and project lead with Hership Institute, and Senator Shanika Roberts-Odell, political activist and scientist. So just before we went to break, Nalita, you were saying that it is about our perception of who and what women are and what they should be and what they should and should not do. And Lord knows in the last few days we've seen this with Rihanna and her belly in her lingerie
Yeah.
going to a fashion show. We have seen it. So is it
Yeah.
more couched in our perception of who women are and what they should be and what their role should be as against the actual thing of politics itself?
I think it's more the role. It's the role of leadership. Who should lead? Who has the power to make decisions for other people? And when we look at our politics, we see that we see generally it is the majority of men in politics. We have not reached the 30% participation of women in politics yet in Barbados, and I don't think around the world. If around the world, it's probably two or three countries in the northern countries, the northern territories. So we still have a situation where I mean, I was confounded when I heard people express this anger and frustration. How dare this woman do something that has been done by politicians, by prime ministers for years? As long as I have known, politicians have used the power to call elections when they wanted to, because that's mainly really the only power I think that prime ministers in this type of system really have. I mean, except for the appointment of judges and so on, and that has been sorted out. But we have to find a way to help people to understand that how disruptive it is to our society when we stop people from performing, when we stop women from performing. And I think that we don't realize that by stopping putting these barriers, that we hinder the development of our society. I mean, just look at the elections in the candidates in last election. I mean, some of them. I mean, Shanika. Shanika. I mean, when you look at them, and you have a Shanika there, and you wonder, wait, why? Where do these people find these politicians from? Is it just because they're men? And why are there not more women that can be used as candidates and so on? And why we must talk about why women are not coming forward, because we take it a joke.
Yes,
Well, Shanika,
I
I was going to
completely
come to
agree.
you with that because I was going to say that one of the things maybe is how you are portrayed on the political platform. If we go back a couple of years, even in the recent election, where it was said on the political platform that the current prime minister and the deputy prime minister don't have any children, so they're not as caring and as loving and as maternal as women without children, and as a woman without children, I couldn't even be bothered to be offended. So is that what we're looking for in the electorate? Is that what we're looking for? We're looking for a nanny state, somebody to look after us.
I don't think we're looking for a nanny state. I think that that was an extremely inept attempt to do some very foolish things on a stage, particularly in a Barbadian society where women have always been nurturing, whether they had children or not had children, have always been. I think that is critical towards why women don't get involved in politics. And I say that because women have always been the backbone of political parties. Women have always been the person, people organizing the, making sure that things are running correctly, gathering up people, going on, knocking on doors, and being quite forceful. But when it came to step forward, some of them are scared and some of them were quite frankly discouraged from, because the level of scrutiny that is placed on women. And there are lots of barriers to women being involved in politics. One of the reasons why, and I've said this before, it's one of the reasons why I chose to be a member of the Barbados Labour Party. Because when you look at the track records of party, when you look at where you, as a woman who wants to step forward in politics, you have to choose a place that you believe is fertile ground for you to grow. That's just basic sense. You choose fertile ground for you to, and the track record of the Barbados Party is that they, allow women to step forward and worthy step forward to be able to show their worth and their value and to ascend. And the thing about what happens within political parties is you must choose a place where the men in the party are willing. I'm
And
not going to say
comfortable
every man.
enough, and comfortable enough to allow
And
you to grow.
exactly, and comfortable enough with the idea of a woman being in charge. I've had this discussion with people before, and it's an interesting complex way men sometimes have a problem with. Some men have a problem with answering to women and sex. And the person said to me, "Well, you answer to a woman from the time you're born. When you get married, your answer to your mother. When you were born, you answer to your mother. When you get married, you answer to your wife. You don't want to then go to work and have to answer to yet another woman." But that was a joke from another conversation. But that's the reality. So you have to have men who are willing to empower women. And some of my key mentors are men. They're also women as well, but are men who see value, right? And who see that you have the potential to do what is necessary and will allow you to prove that. That is part of the issue. Part of the issue is, as I indicated before, sometimes you're forced to, and you family will try to protect you. They'll tell you, sometimes, why you want to do that. There are other ways to contribute. Everybody knows you're smart. You don't need to be upfront. You don't need to take those slings and those arrows, and sometimes, that very chaotic situation that comes, that you have to deal with people's opinions about the hair, clothing, the shoes, everything but what comes out of your mouth sometimes. So that's part of the issue as it relates. And some parts of the issues for me, and I hope there's an opportunity to discuss this, are financial. It's a critical statement that has been said in development, sir, that when you empower a man, you empower a man, but when you empower a woman on an economic basis, then you indeed empower a family, right? And that's not to say anything against men. I'm sure there are lots of men who empower their families, but it's a general thought in development circles. And women into politics, a lot of times there are women who are financially not only just supporting their immediate family, but extended family, right? They're responsible for a lot that goes on in their lives. And financially, being involved in politics can be an expensive endeavor. And you sometimes
Yes.
have to choose what
Frightening.
you're going to spend that money.
Well, I'm
I was
glad you
going to say
went
it's
there, because
not.
I'm coming to Nalita, because I know she would know this. Nalita at one stage was a candidate and also the general secretary of the NDP. So Nalita, talk.
No, I was going to say it's not only, it's a frightening experience because when you don't have the finance, you become dependent and vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable in politics or in any situation where men are the majority, and again, I'm not trying to malign men, I'm just speaking as an old woman about reality of life and women. In a situation where where they are the majority of women, women tend to be vulnerable because of the whole notion of harassment. And then when money is involved, it's like, yeah, I give you money to do this, but where's my kickback? Because we're still looking for that money that we paid for the girlfriend that we took out at 16 when we paid for her trip to the Vista. So we think, because and she gave us a kiss. So because we got that was a transaction, we're still looking for other kinds of transactions when we are engaging in women and finance and so on. So that is a major, major issue. And then just how people perceive you, the people in your constituency, how they perceive you. Like, it's not just auntie at the high level, at the level of prime minister, but auntie at the level of as a candidate, because now you are expected as a candidate to provide this, to provide that. A Sunday morning, somebody phone you and the gas run out and the children need to get something to eat, and those kind of things. Those are things that men do because they can put their hands in their pocket and
Or
they
they
can
have
put to
enough,
give the money,
or they have
or
enough
they have
support in terms of
that they can.
either sponsor and sponsorship, the word I mean, in terms of enough support and fundraising,
Exactly.
etc., to be able to put their hand in their pockets. But for
And
women
women
it's
can't
different.
do that.
Women
And
can't
so
do
they're
that.
seen by their constituents as being cheap and they don't want to give the women anything. I only like to deal with men because men can see me and men can help me. So these very people that should be supporting you and should be giving you the little $10 to help you to give somebody else, they're the ones who are also looking for you to give them money that you really don't have. So it's really a hard place to be. That's why I say, if you want to be involved, you really have to love it. You really have to feel passionate about it. Unfortunately, time has overtaken me. My passion is still there. Maisie went into politics after retirement. I think maybe there's a hope for me as well. Who knows?
Thank you
I
very
keep
much for
hope.
that,
I keep
Nalita.
hope alive.
There's
Hold
keep
on
hope
for
alive.
that.
We're gonna take a break. When we come back, so can women make the hard choices in politics, or do they become dictators? More on Forde Co. Welcome back to Forde Co. Now, H. Odessa Gittins, she was the first Parliamentary Secretary of Education between 1966 to 1971. Then we had Gertrude Eastman. Gert, she was a Parliamentary Secretary in Health and Welfare. Dame Billy Miller, she became Minister of Health in 1976. So I'm saying that because I'm setting up context. Can women make the hard choices, or as women seen as soft within the political sphere? I'm going to come to you, Roshana, for that.
That's such a interesting question. Can women make the hard choices just in politics? Because women make hard choices daily. Women had the majority of the households in Barbados. Most of the households that are in poverty are headed by women. And we could go through the list of the statistics as it relates to women and their involvement. But a woman who has to head a household has to make decisions about finances. She has to make decisions about her family. She has to make so many different decisions. And so that's one part. And then the next part for me is that it seems as though what the question asked just implies that simply because I am a woman, that my decisions are somehow
Based on
going
emotion.
to be tainted by
By
and those kind
emotion,
of things.
exactly.
And because you are a man, you are going to make logical decisions. And that reasoning in itself is flawed because it is flawed because we do see how men respond on emotion, that emotions are not simply based on gender or simply by virtue of being born female. Those are emotions that everyone feels. And but more importantly, we can look right now. We have the most women we have ever had in cabinet and parliament in Barbados since we have had since independence. The last two terms have resulted in us doubling the number of women who have been in cabinet, been in parliament, been elected, and been appointed to cabinet since we have been an independent nation. And that says a lot. But we can also look at the reality that women have done phenomenal things in this country. It was because of Dame Billy Miller that we pushed the family life abortion, the family life policy, and we have seen the impact of that. Um, we can look at the track record of the current prime minister in the various ministries that she has had as AG, as in education, and see what the track record is. And then if we just simply take a look at COVID and the countries that have done very well as it relates to responding to the social challenges of COVID and remaining humane within the crisis, New Zealand, Barbados, led by women because we see women as offering compassionate and care leadership because that's what matters when you consider people being in the center. So I don't think the question should be in 2022 whether or not women are capable of making the hard decisions because we know that the question has to be, are we willing to do the work to get rid of the barriers that prevent women from showing up to do the hard work? And I think that's it.
I agree with you there. That definitely is the question. How do political parties see women in terms of political currency? In any toss up between nominating a candidate for the seat at the executive level of the party, do they see your candidate is a man on one hand and a woman on the other hand? Do they look at them in terms of each brings something to the party and to the constituency, and therefore we are going to select them on that? Or do we think, well, the fellows know he could buy drinks in Ramshaw, so let's go with him? I see you smiling, Shanika.
I smile because it's an interesting statement, and that's the truth. I can only speak for where I have been, and one of the key things that I have always been taught is that you will get nowhere because you are a woman. You must be a competent woman. You must be good. You must be, in some cases, and women are taught that continuously, not just in politics, but all across the sphere. You must be twice as anyone else you are coming up against, because there will be those who will immediately see your gender as a problem. Now, in political, again, that I know, it's really about what is your ability. What is your ability to move forward? And unfortunately, all political parties do not believe that. And all parties, I mean, you can see with their track records, that is not necessarily where they land. And I think that is something that is critical for us, for our politics. So you have to always consider everything about the way that Barbadian politics moves forward when you're looking at candidates for a constituency.
I'm going to come back to you, Nalita, on this one in terms of how do political parties see women in terms of political currency?
I think that the political leaders will recognize the reality that women face, and they want to win the election, and so that they will be very selective in terms of how they go about choosing a candidate to ensure that they will win. If the toss up comes to electing to selecting a male candidate as opposed to a female candidate, I think that the toss up is going to go to the male candidate, because the male candidate is just basically seen as more viable. I saw that even in the NDP, when the NDP had the most candidates, was even able to mount a all women, all female
Mm-hmm.
campaign. Um, they you still had situations where there was a lot of manipulations in terms of who should run or who should not run, because of the sex, because of whether that person could participate in that area, or that people down there, like they say, they really like women, they really like men, because down there got a lot of rum shops, and they can go and put the rum and put the money down, and the guy's going to come and get the beer, and they're going to get the stuff and so on. Women generally don't do that. Women talk about doing giving them the fish, and the constituent want no, well, I ain't got no water, and I ain't got no fishing up. So you're talking foolishness. I want the $20 to go do something for my children. So it becomes very, very difficult, and I think that political leaders will choose the people who they believe will win, because that's what they want to do. They want to win the election. Um, within the NDP, we had situations where at the very first time we came out, all of those women had to fight really, really hard to be nominated, and they did it. They did it with pride. They did it, and they made the party. They made everybody very, very proud in terms of their performance. And I don't know why we still think that they can't function. I mean, look at Israel. Who bombed. Who bombed? Look at the British Prime Minister, and the
Yeah, there was
bombing there
Margaret
as well.
Thatcher. Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher as well. I mean, decisions are made when decisions need to be made. It has nothing to do with whether you're female or male. It has to do with whether you are able to make good decisions for that specific situation. And I think that a lot of times we put it down and think, oh, it's because a man that he did that. It's because he was well trained, and if a
And he had
woman
good
is well trained,
advisors.
and he had good
Good
advisors,
advisors.
exactly. So I think that we need to throw it out, and not have anything to do with it anymore. Women can make decisions just like anybody else. They make decisions with their head, not with the
Their heart.
reproductive. I know I was gonna
I was
say
working
not
with
with their
heart. I was working
reproductive
with heart.
areas, right? But not with their
Shanika
no.
has joined us back. Shanika, thank you for coming back to us. As we were talking earlier about women and political currency, I remember years ago, I trying to remember which party it was, talked about having the promise on the campaign trail that they were going to have a particular quota of women in parliament. But are we really seeing that? And just looking back at the history, the first women were parliamentary secretaries. They weren't even ministers of government. I think the first minister of government we had was Dame Billy
Minister
Miller in
Billy.
1976. Maisie
Dame
Barker
Billy.
Welch, even though she was a parliamentary secretary from 1966, she only became Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office in 1990. So do we still see women in terms of moving up the ranks, not just in the party now, but you're now in terms of statecraft?
I think that we have come to a point in Barbados where we can no longer deny the fact that women are and are capable of and continue to be exemplary leaders, have major contributions to make. I think at this point as a nation, we see women in more positions of power, contributing and doing well in positions of power than ever before. Have we reached the promised land? No. The reality is, anybody who looks at our population statistics and then compares the amount of women that are in power or in parliament will automatically see that we've not reached the promised land, so to speak. I think it's a matter of continuous development. It's continuous pushing. It's a woman who has been successful being able to reach back her hand to another woman she sees is capable, and continuing to do that. And I think that that's the place within political that is critical, to be able to mentor those who you see as having skill sets, and not just mentoring someone because they are a woman, mentoring them because they are brilliant, and giving them the opportunity to contribute. And I think that political parties continue to see the value in women, and I think that women must continue to push boundaries. I mean, even in this current, the prime minister is a woman. There was a tremendous outcry. Well, not a tremendous outcry, but there were concerns that were raised when a all female political meeting was held, right? And you would think that that's an odd thing, but I think that it's about men often say they don't move from a place of emotion, but there are emotions involved. And I think there's a lot of consideration that needs to be had on both sides. But I think that we are moving towards better, but the fight is certainly not over. I think that it will take mentoring, it will take a lot of active and positive action on the parts of political parties and on the part of both men and women who head political parties to continue to bring women. But it's also on the basis of women. You know, sometimes we've got to step past what is our all of the reasons why you shouldn't, and recognize the reasons why you should, because you have a contribution to make and can make a difference in the lives of the average Barbadian, because you have a perspective that is worth sharing, right? And persons who deserve to be represented. So that's my position on that.
Thank you very much. We're going to take a break. We'll be come back. Final thoughts on women in politics. Stay with us. And we're back in this, our final segment. We look at quotas. There's been I know in the United Kingdom, there's a whole thing on quotas for women to get them to sit on boards, that they need to increase the number of women who sit on boards. And for quite some time, there's been talk about quotas in terms of women in parliament. Do quotas work, or does a woman in parliament need to be a more organic process? Roshana.
So Guyana is one of the countries that has a quota in place, and basically what the quota says is that 30% of the persons who are nominated or presented as candidates for the election have to be women. And it does work. Quotas can work, but quotas have to be implemented alongside other considerations and making room for certain things. So, for example, is this a seat that can be won? What is the history of this seat? Danica spoke about it. The cultures that you might find in a constituency. So what is it? And what kind of candidate do you need? So it's not enough to say, okay, we know that we lose this seat every single election and we need another woman in, so we're going to put you here because we know that you lose, and you don't put the investment and you don't put the backing for that person to be able to mobilize and actually win the seat. In order for quotas to be meaningful, it has to be complemented by things such as training. So women, there should be training, because the space that we navigate is different. How we engage with constituents, the kind of considerations that we have to keep in mind may be different for personal reasons. There's also the need for training, the financial support that may be necessary, because typically it is seen as typically what we see is that women usually don't have the same kind of financial support as men. And so there, it is necessary for parties to consider, do we need to put more financial support for this person? Do we have to seek to mobilize more resources and those different things? And quotas do not remove the necessity for persons to be capable, for persons to bring competence to the job. So oftentimes when you speak about affirmative action, persons think is a easy way in
That you're
for
getting it because just
populations
because
or
you're a
for
woman.
exactly, and that's not the case. What you're saying is that we recognize that there barriers, systemic barriers, challenges within the system for women actually entering elective politics and actively pursuing. And therefore, we want to provide a space for them to be able to do so, supported by XYZ. And that is really important, because that 30% does not mean that that is the maximum that can be there. It just means that we now recognize that in a country where our democracy is dependent on involvement of people, that with 50% or approximately 50% of our population being women, that they have to be involved in the representation. And we know that it's not as simple as them not wanting to enter. We know that there are challenges and barriers that they face and things that discourage them. So how do we equip and encourage them to enter and be involved in elective politics?
But Nalita, somebody is going to say, but why quotas for women? Why not quotas for the disabled? Why not quotas for, I don't know, Indians or Indian women? Why quotas? Because isn't it really a more organic process from me liking politics to me wanting to be involved in politics to me actually being elected? And you can't force people. You can set a quota and you can say 30%, but that doesn't mean that that 30% will be elected. So is there some way that we can marry the two things, electability and the quota?
Well, I call it special measures. I don't call it quotas. Because a special measure could be anything. It could be the finance, it could be the training, it could be constituency education, the constituents education. It could be a number of things to help people to recognize that a female or a woman can be a candidate and can be a good representative. So I think that we do need to bring it. If we don't use special measures, I think there was something that said that we probably take another 100 years or so before we would reach that gender equity in terms of having that 30% participation in politics. I also don't buy totally into the first past the post system. Neither do I buy totally into the system where you have this list and you put this 30 women up or 40 women up or 30 percentage up or something like that. Because a lot of times at the end of the day, how that is done, I am not clear on. So even although we've been talking about proportional representation and having parties to put up a certain percentage of women, I am still not clear that that works. Look at what happened in London. At one stage, you had 100 women that were nominated, and they talked about the prime minister's girls. But then the next election, where were they? They were all gone because the system that was used took took that into consideration, make sure that those girls weren't there again. Or I don't know what happened, but certainly the girls were gone in the next those 100 girls. I'm saying girls because that's the term that they use. Those 100 girls were gone. So we need a lot of things to help to get women to participate. One of the things that I when I talk about needing more wives, all of the political organizations have, not all, because there are a lot of new ones now, I'm not sure that they have, but the traditional political parties had women's arms. It is not just to go to political parties and run a flag to support your party, but it's to choose a female candidate too and maybe go and do her shopping, maybe go and do her laundry, maybe go and pick up her children if she has children. Those type of things that can support the women's arms, that can support women, that can remove some of the pressures from women, that they could participate freer in politics because we know how it is structured. But if we don't take into consideration those things, then we are going to be plodding along. We're going to get seven, we're going to get eight, we're going to get nine, but we're not going to get that 30%. But at the same time, we'll still be seeing, but look, we got more women in politics and in parliament, and they're not speaking on our behalf. If you still have a minority in parliament and you don't know who is going to speak for you, who is going to stand up with you, because you don't have a gender caucus, a women's caucus, you don't know who's going to stand up with you on a specific issue, you're not going to expose yourself.
All right, I'm going to stop you there, Nalita, because in the last
I
couple
was going to
minutes,
stop there.
literally, last couple minutes we've got, and those will be your final comments. I'm going to ask Shanika and Roshana to give us just 30 seconds each. Final thoughts.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here with my final thoughts. One, one of the ways that we really focus on is organization and things that we teach our children from very young. I think we need to not just about women in politics, but it's also politics itself and about the importance of elections and those kinds of things. We need to get teaching those things from very young to empowering young women in primary school, in secondary school, to have a voice, to speak up, to recognize that they are powerful and that that power is not an antithesis to anyone else, but that it is solely and fully theirs and it's rightful, right? I think there's to some extent a little bit of imposter syndrome that happens when you're not trained to sit in your own power and believe in yourself. So that is one aspect of it, to start training women from young. And I think additionally, Melita is very correct that within party structures, women within party structures need to be able to reach out their hands to women they see being very good. And I've had that experience of women reaching out within parties to say, "You're incredible. I think you're really wonderful. You have potential. Let me help you. How can I help you?" And I think that's critical and key to recognize allies. But it's also about allies within the circle that are men, that men can play a powerful role in adjusting this proportional differential that we have. Men are key and critical. I often find that gender, male and female has to go hand in hand towards enhancing life, getting women and the society itself to where it needs to be.
All righty, I'm
So
going
I
to
think
stop
that
you there because you've run over. Roshana, you get the last 30-ish seconds.
So I think the way how we, Chimamanda Adichie said it, the way we do gender is wrong. And until we get to the point where we start to unpack the way that we do gender, we have to be able to respond to the challenges that women face with action. And so once again, training, I agree with affirmative action, affirmative policies. And I also believe that party structures have to be reviewed in order to figure out not just how do we have a women's league, the women who are active in that, but how do we invite women to offer their potential to electoral politics and elective politics, and how do we make sure that the ones who are exemplary and great, that they do not sit back because they don't feel confident, they do not feel called, and they do not feel like they have a place as a representative.
Okay, thank you very much. Ladies, you are the first guest on Forde Co. So I want to thank you. Know that I will be calling upon you and inviting you back in more programs to come. You've been watching Forde Co, the spinoff of the X-Trail, or political program that we launch every election season. My guest today is Senator Shanika Roberts-Odle. She's a political activist and scientist. Roshana Trim, the youth development specialist and the project lead in Leadership Institute, and Alita Kajada, a retired program officer at the Bureau of Gender Affairs. And this was our first program to commemorate International Women's Day on March 8th. I'm Joel Forde. See you next week on Forde Co.